Isang mapagpalayang umaga po sa ating lahat. Kumusta po ang bawat isa sa atin? Manatili po tayong malusog at ligtas. Ugaliin po natin ang pagsusuot ng face mask at face shield. Ugaliin din po natin ang physical distancing at ang pananatili sa bahay. Ako po si Michael Anthony Mantala, Science Education Specialist ng UP NISMED at ang inyo po ang magiging tagapagpadaloy sa webinar session natin ngayong umaga. Karamihan sa inyo marahil ay kilala na ang KaSaMa Teachers Community. Para sa iba, marahil ay bago pa ito sa inyong pandinig. Before I tell you more about KaSaMa Teachers Community, para sa mga nakakaalam na or kahit sa mga hindi pa, maaari nyo pong banggitin sa comment section kung ano ang ibig sabihin ng KaSaMa. Okay, ano po ang ibig sabihin ng KaSaMa? Marahil marami na sa inyo po ang nakakaalam, lalo po yung mga nakadalo sa mga nauna na nating mga webinar at gayon din sa mga miyembro na ng KaSaMa Teachers Community. Ano po kaya ang ibig sabihin ng KaSaMa? Ayan, marami na nga ang nakakakilala sa KaSaMa Teachers Community. Tama po kayo, KaSaMa stands for KaScience and KaMathematics Teachers. Anong mga organizations naman kaya ang mga nasa likod ng KaSaMa Teachers Community? KaSaMa Teachers Community, KaScience and KaMathematics. Tama po kayo, KaScience, KaMathematics, yan po ang ibig sabihin ng KaSaMa. KaSaMa Teachers Community or KaScience and KaMathematics is a professional online community for Filipino K-12 science and mathematics teachers launched by the University of the Philippines National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development or UP NISMED in partnership with KaSaMa Brothers Foundation or GBF. To know more about our platform, please watch this video. Ayan. Aside from webinars, we also continuously develop content and learning resources such as lesson plans, activities, and exercises, as well as assessment and test items, among other things, which could be of help to you as you prepare for the opening of classes, especially as you transition to the next normal in education. Now, how do you register? Just visit www.kasamateachers.ph. Ulitin ko, www.kasamateachers.ph, which is now flashed on your screen, and type in the caption and sign up for free. Connect with your co-teachers, connect with KaSaMa Teachers Community. Welcome to KaSaMa Webinars by KaSaMa Teachers Community. Ako pong muli si Michael Anthony Mantala, Science Education Specialist ng UP NISMED at ang inyo pong magiging tagapagpadaloy sa webinar session natin ngayong umaga. This session is made possible by the UP National Institute for Science and Mathematics Education Development or UP NISMED in partnership with KaSaMa Brothers Foundation. UP NISMED is an extension unit of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, whose mandate is to help improve science and mathematics education in the country. GBF is a family foundation whose core thrust is advancing STEM education, believing that this is the driving force towards sustainable national development. In 2011, UP NISMED established KaSaMa Teachers to help teachers during the transition to the K-12 basic education curriculum. In 2019, UP NISMED and GBF partnered to bring an improved one-stop hub for communication, collaboration, learning, and development for Filipino K-12 science and mathematics educators. Through its website, KaSaMaTeachers.ph, KaSaMa provides free quality teaching resources, a platform for sharing best practices and professional development opportunities to K-12 science and mathematics teachers. As we transition to the next normal, now more than ever, KaSaMa Teachers Community will continue to bring you relevant and helpful opportunities for professional development and development learning resources which could help you prepare for the opening of classes. Kasama niyo po kami, mga kasama. As we begin today's webinar session, just a few reminders. Huwag mahihiyang magtanong. If you have questions, just comment with your school and division. We will be collecting your questions and have our resources speaker answer these before the session ends. Feel free to tag your friends, message them, and invite them to join us anytime. Stay with us until the end of the session. Our resources speaker will provide a copy of our presentation to all who will answer the feedback form at the end of the session. It will be sent to your email addresses. Let me now introduce to you our resource speaker. Our resource speaker is a science education specialist of the University of the Philippines National Institute of Science for Science and Mathematics Education Development, or UP NISMED, and an adjunct faculty of the UP Open University, teaching both undergraduate and graduate courses. She has been involved in training teachers on the use of ICT in science and mathematics at the basic education level for 27 years now. Mga kasama, to talk with us about delivering instruction through modular distance learning, let us all welcome Dr. Mona Lisa Sasing.
Okay, magandang umaga sa lahat, and para dun sa mga taga Mindanao, mayong buntag sa tanan. I hope my internet connection will be stable at this time. Medyo nagka-problema lang po. Anyway, so let me start now by sharing my screen. I hope you will be able to see my screen. Nakita niyo po ba? I'm sorry, I'm inside the car because it's outside the house so that I can get a clearer, a better signal. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, Dr. Mona, we see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay lang ba yung reception ko sa inyo? I'm sorry, I have to ask this because I am so not sure with my internet connection. Okay lang ba?
So far, so good, Doc Mona.
Thank you.
You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Pasensya na po sa background. Okay, again, maayong buntag sa tanan from the Visayas and Mindanao regions, and magandang umaga po sa lahat ng mga taga Luzon. What we're going to discuss this morning will cover about delivering instruction in modular distance learning. Specifically, I'm going to give you an overview of what distance learning is as a form of distance, what modular distance learning is as a form of a distance learning, and what your tasks will be in modular distance learning. In addition, I'm going to give you some guidelines on creating learning plans that will guide your students in modular distance learning. And we'll also discuss with you the benefits of modular distance learning and leave you with key components for an effective instruction in distance learning in general. All right. We have met, or we have probably been attending webinars related to remote or distance learning. Let me just give you or refresh your minds again on what distance or remote learning is. It's that educational setup where you and your learners still remain connected and engaged with the content of the subject that you teach, even while you're working in your own learning spaces, which in most cases is your home. And information in this setup may be relayed through the use of technology or through print materials, or even in digital format, materials in digital format. And DepEd, through its basic education learning continuity plan, has prescribed three major types of distance learning modalities. One of which is the TV or radio-based instruction. That's making use of educational TV programs and radio programs for instruction, which has to be accompanied by a learning manual. The second is the online distance learning. Of course, this is what we refer to sometimes as e-learning. It's making use of technology, of the internet basically, to connect with your students, to deliver instruction, and most of the instructions here are delivered through a learning management system. The third is the modular distance learning. And I believe this is the most common learning delivery modalities, the learning delivery modality that's being preferred by not just by teachers, but also by parents, by students, because of the its flexibility and it's cheaper. Okay. DepEd also considered blending all three distance learning modalities, or two of them, and DepEd LCP called it blended distance learning. So you can combine either online distance learning with modular distance learning, or you can combine TV with modular, or all of the three. Now, this session will focus on the modular distance learning because this is, as I've mentioned earlier, this is the most preferred mode of delivering instruction in this time of pandemic. This next slide shows you the list of technologies that a study on distance learning has conducted, which most teachers preferred, and why, no? And from among these technology tools that they have identified that they have used in delivering distance learning, print technology is the one that was the most preferred among all the respondents of the study. According to them, it's because the materials in modular distance learning, making use of printed materials, is relatively inexpensive. It's portable, and the comfort level is high. Why? Because they're used to it. We're used to reading textbooks, we're used to reading printed materials, we're used to giving printed handouts to our students, and of course, they're readily available. But of course, there are also limitations to making use of the print technology. Number one limitation is that the interactions, or no, there are no interactions at all, or the interaction is limited. The student is just interacting with the content of the modules. There's no student-student interaction, and there's even, if there are no communications with the teachers, then there's no teacher-student interaction as well. And there's limited sensory involvement. And of course, there's a requirement for your students to be able to read text, no? So this requires reading skills. And there's time delay in terms of giving feedback to your students. However, in our country like the Philippines, where internet connection is not so good, and also most of our students don't have access to it, due to lack of resources, due to lack of financial resources. So we still opt for modular distance learning delivered in printed modules. So modular distance learning is actually that form of distance learning. That's the learning delivery modality, one of the distance learning delivery modalities described in the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan that makes use of learning modules that may come in print or in digital format. This learning delivery modality does not limit the students to just the module itself, but also the teacher may also refer students to other resources like the learner's materials, the textbooks, or additional activity sheets and study guides. But what are learning modules? Let's define first and let's clear up, no? What learning modules are. Learning modules are referred to as those self-contained instruction are referred to as self-contained independent unit of instruction consisting of learning and assessment tasks organized around a well-defined topic intended to help learners understand the lessons covered. As from what I have heard, most DepEd division offices have this pool of writers who are tasked to develop the learning modules for the subject area that you teach. And then these are being reviewed, and these are the learning modules that you're going to use when you deliver the modular distance learning. A learning module is also that form of instructional package, which is usually referred to as a unit or a chapter or a topic or a segment of instruction. It's also referred to as a standard unit or the instructional section of the subject that you teach that is a self-contained chunk of instruction. This usually covers a week of instruction. However, it actually depends on the topic that's covered by the module. It can be longer or it can be shorter, and it also depends on how you want to deliver instruction through modular approach. I'm sure you are pretty familiar with the parts of a learning module, but let me just refresh you on the parts of a learning module. We have, of course, a brief introduction of what the module is about, what the module covers, that will be addressed at the end of the module. And then some modules actually include a pre-test, and also a post-test at the end. And the key concepts that your module will cover, and of course, the learning resources that your students will use, and the learning activities that your students will do during the course of studying through the module, and the assignments that they need to do, and how they will be assessed, the outputs that they need to submit. And other modules include reflection questions, and of course, the references. Let me just show you a sample of a learning module in mathematics. Can you see this on my screen now? Okay. This is a learning module for grade 7 statistics. And there's a welcome message for the students, and the student will be oriented on what the icons mean. So if they see something like this one, then there's that need to access the internet because the resource is in the internet. And then if they see an icon like this one, then they share it with the partner, And there's the table of contents. This module has 2 units, which focus on looking at data and preparing for the process of collecting data. And then a quick review of their prior knowledge. Where they're given a pre-test. And here are other resources that your students can access in the course of learning through the module. And this is now where the first activity comes in, where your students will will make sense of the data around them. So here is an example of a learning module in grade 7 mathematics. Okay, now here, many of you may have known this already, but again, let me just refresh your minds on what modular approach to teaching is. It's actually that approach where the learner has the control of his or her learning and takes greater responsibility for learning. And in this case, tasks are grouped together into modules, and the modules serve as their guide, no? In the presentation and application of the teaching and learning processes. When you do online distance learning, you can actually still make use of the modular approach, except that in the case of online distance learning, you deliver instruction through the use of the internet. Unlike in the modular distance learning, you deliver instruction through the use of just the printed module or the digital module that does not require to have access to the internet, okay? That's how DepEd defined the modular distance learning. So remember again, modular approach to teaching is not limited to being delivered through printed learning modules. It can be delivered through the use of your learning management systems or through online distance learning. So here is now the major part of our discussion this morning. What will be your tasks in modular distance learning? What do you think? What do you need to prepare when you deliver instruction through modular distance learning? What will you do in the course of delivering instruction through modular distance learning? Basically, it's the same, no? When you do your usual face-to-face instruction, except that there are additional considerations. What are these considerations that we have to bear in mind, no? When we plan for modular distance learning? First is, of course, in guiding learning, you have been doing that in the face-to-face mode. You guide learning. How do you guide learning amongst your students in the face-to-face mode? Many of you, at the start of the class or of the school year, orients your student, no, on what they're supposed to expect in your class. So it's also the same in modular distance learning, except in this case, you have to present to them the entire orientation prior to them doing their own independent study. Because in the usual face-to-face, you can give it per quarter or you can give it daily, no? Like this today class, what we'll do is an activity on computing for the mean, median, and mode, or computing for measures of central tendency. In this case, you have to prepare your orientation for a given period of time, or it would be best if you can orient your students what will be covered for the entire school year. Okay, so students will know. Students can anticipate what they need to do, what they need to prepare for class. Of course, orientation won't be feasible uh, right now if we do it face to face. That's why instead of an orientation, we replace it with a learning plan. You need to prepare a learning plan for your students to guide them as they uh, do independent study through modular distance learning. What is a learning plan? Again, it's that document that guides your students through the content. It provides them with the sequence of topics that will be covered and the learning activities that your learners will go through in the process of doing modular distance learning. And the learning plan can also provide, you can also provide your students with additional resources and activities which are not covered in the learning module. This is particularly true for teachers who are not the writers of the modules. In cases where you find the activities in the module uh, to be lacking, no? For example, if you feel that your students need more activities for them to be able to understand the concept of measures of central tendency, then you have to provide them with additional activities and resources. And that will be introduced in your learning plan because the modules are already prepared. They're being distributed. And if you're not the writer, then most probably those additional activities are not part of the module that are being prepared by the division, for example. Okay, so you can add those in your learning plan. How do you make the learning plan? Here are some guidelines that I'd like to share with you when you create your learning plan. First is you list down all the learning activities that your learners will do in a given period of time. It can be daily or weekly. Okay, I'll show you an example of a learning plan later. Another thing that you need to consider is for each learning activity, you have to identify the corresponding learning competency or learning competencies being addressed. So that students will know, no, that, oh, by doing this activity, they should be able to do this, or they should be able to address or to attain these learning competencies. Then you have to list the outputs or the assignments required, or even the assessment, no, if there are any, that the learners need to complete and or to submit in that given period of time. And provide information regarding how they will be assessed. In addition, you also have to list, as I've mentioned earlier, list additional activities that your learners may do to enrich their learning experience. And provide them with information as to how they can contact you in case they need to clarify something, or in case they need to ask something about related to the content, no, or to the topic that they're studying in the module. Or in the case of DepEd, the basic LCP provides for a learning facilitator in the community that can guide the students as they do independent study through modular distance learning. And that learning facilitator can either be the parent, or if the parent cannot do it, then there will be someone in the community that will be assigned to guide the students, no? And you have to provide them with information as to how they are assessed. They can how you can have a list of the outputs needed and give them a description of each output and even the criteria or even the rubric that will be used to assess their outputs or their assignments. Here are some suggested components of a learning plan. Of course, pwedeng hindi nyo lahat gamitin yung components na to. You can just select which ones are important for your students to know that they will be guided as they do modular distance learning. So there's that period covered. So the learning plan, what is this for what period is this learning plan for? Will this be for a week, for a quarter, for a month, and also it should have the learning competencies. It should indicate the learning competencies covered and the outline of the content covered, the learning resources, the learning activities, the deadline for submission of outputs, the assessment plan, the general guidelines that you want them to observe, like some rules on or some guidelines on how they should write their submit the written outputs, or how they write the written outputs that they need to observe yung copyright laws, etc. And of course, your contact information. You have to give that to your student in distance learning. I'm going to show you some examples of learning plans in UPOU. For tertiary level, we call it course guide. Okay, so this is the course guide for a Math 2 subject or course, which is on practical mathematics. So it lists here the course objectives, the outline of the contents that will be covered, and then the materials that will be used. No, in this case, this subject has a module for, but in digital format. The modules are uploaded on the learning management system. And then what other resources are available for them. So there's an interactive practice quiz because this is for online distance learning. And then here's another important aspect of a learning guide or a course guide, which is very crucial for students to be on track. No, you have to provide them with a study schedule, or what I have mentioned there. You have to list down the activities that they need to do for a week, the outputs that they need to submit within that given period of time. In this case, the study schedule is arranged weekly, is organized weekly, and there's the corresponding activity that your students need to do during that week, and then what resource they need to access to read for that week, and then your deadlines for submission of an assignment or any output that you ask from your students has to be highlighted. And then you include there the course requirements, and even the assignments that your students need to submit aside from the other outputs, and some guidelines, and also regarding examinations if there are any. Then the Q&A forum, this is for online, and then the grading system, and then some general house rules, no? And then of course your contact information. This one is from the Department of Education, which was issued through Memorandum DMCI 2020-00162 by Undersecretary Diosdado San Antonio. There's a sample learning plan here, and DepEd calls it a weekly home learning plan for students, no? So here's an example of a weekly home learning plan. And here, if you notice, the learning tasks are very detailed, no? In this case, the learning tasks are being specified in the weekly home learning plan. But in some cases, the learning plan may contain just a reference to the module activity, no, or to the activity in the module, just like here, no, that they study Unit 1, Module 1, and make sure to answer the self-assessment questions. In this case, nakalista na po lahat kung ano yung gagawin ng bata for that day, for that period. And in this case, this weekly home learning plan is a consolidation of the learning plans for each subject area. Kasi syempre, each subject teacher or learning area teacher has to come up with a learning plan for his or her students. So the advisor will be the one to compile or to consolidate all of those and will be the one to give those to the students, no, together with the modules that the students will make use, no, through the modular distance learning. And here, the mode of delivery refers to the mode of submission of outputs. Okay, so this is the sample learning plan for that's being suggested in the memo issued by USEC DADS. You can choose which learning plan template you provide you use for your students, no, for your classes. For as long as the important thing is, for as long as you cover the important aspects, no, like it should have the first and foremost, it should list the learning activities that your students will do in that particular period of time. Okay, and then it also should tell them what they need to submit, if there are any, what they need and how they submit it, and how they will be assessed, and of course the period, no, that is covered by that learning plan. Okay, going back to my presentation. So I hope that's clear to you. So these are just suggested components. Of course, you can have your own. Ang importante, again, are those learning activities should be there. The learning resources should be there. The deadline for submission of outputs should also be there. And what else should you do? You also need to monitor progress of your learners. When you monitor the progress of your learners, you have to prepare a monitoring plan. And that document is something that will tell how your learners has progressed throughout, no, the period. And a monitoring plan may have the following information: how a learner will be monitored, the method of monitoring a learner's progress, status of the learner, intervention or the plan, the intervention or the intervention plan that you provide, and then how the progress of the learner. And of course, in distance learning, it's important that you communicate with your students. In modular distance learning, where your students may not be able to or has no access to the internet, I really suggest you communicate to them by calling them or through the learning facilitator. And well, it would be good if you can set up a time for consultations. And of course, if it's done face-to-face, you have to observe physical distancing. And then it's also good to set up a way to communicate with your learners, not just by phone. If they can have access to Messenger, then you can create a chat group for them for your class. And also, of course, one of your tasks, just like in F2F or face-to-face instruction, you assess learning of the learning of your students and come up with an assessment plan, which is normally integrated in the overall learning plan or learning guide for your students. And it should describe how learning will be assessed, and an assessment plan may consist of the following information: contents or competencies addressed, how often assessment will be done, and then the list of class requirements and the submission dates, and the methods of assessing learning. And why is an assignment important in modular distance learning? It's because it will keep your students on track. No? So with the assignments, you will know that your students has progressed or not, and you will know if the students have actually understood what's being taught through the modules. And also, it will require them to do the activity, because that assignment has to be integrated, and it has to show something that they are able to integrate what they have understood from the set of topics covered or discussed in the module. And of course, you need to support your students. You need to support your learners, not just academic support. You have to provide emotional support, as you have been doing, no, as teachers during your face-to-face instruction. You also provide the usual psychosocial support, and of course, the administrative or logistic support. And it would be good if you set up a group support for your students. If you can assign in one community, if there's a cluster of them in one community, then you can group them together and let that be their support group. No, that's where they can throw questions or they can ask for help from their peers. And then, well, of course, it has to be done following the physical distancing protocol. But if they can have access to just a messenger app, then it would be good, no? Because that can serve as their group chat, which will help them in the course of their learning through modular distance learning. And if it's that's why if it's okay, if it's feasible, you can provide an online support system for your learners, or you may need to call them from time to time to check on them. So again, as I've mentioned, these are the usual face instruction. However, there are additional considerations that you need to bear in mind. No, like in guiding learning, you have to provide them with the learning guide, which you don't do, no, in the face-to-face instruction. And also, you monitor the progress of your learners, and you have to have that monitoring plan. This is most especially important for students who lag behind. No? If you see that one particular student has not submitted several assignments already, then you have to make sure that you know why, the reason why, and you have to see if they are having problem understanding the content, or what other problems the students encountered. No, you have to identify those, because that's important in monitoring, and that's important in helping you address, no, the problem and making the students be on track again. And then communicate with your learners, and also assess your learners and support your learners, not just provide them with do not just provide them with academic support. You also have to provide them with the usual support that you give them during face-to-face instruction. Psychosocial, emotional, and logistic support. Okay, so what are the benefits of using modular instruction or the modular approach? According to Nardo, okay, so here now, So the benefits to learners for those doing modular distance learning is first, they become more effective individuals, especially if there are reflection questions incorporated in the modules. And then it helps them also become more responsible for their own learning, and it encourages independent study, no? And aside from that, it helps them develop better self-study skills. And it also develops the writing skills of learners. For teachers, the teachers can now attend to different students who work on varied tasks, no? And to teachers, also, they see that their students need to do or need to be more activities to help them, or need to be given more activities to make their learning, enrich learning, to supplement their learning, then the teacher can do that. Then learning also continues even with the absence of the teacher. Just distance can make use of modular in your usual instruction, and then it facilitates learning individualized or self-action. As tips for you when you do distance learning, this is not applicable only to modular distance learning, but applicable to all modes of distance learning. First is you have to set clear expectations. It is important that you, from the very start, you inform your students what you expect them to complete, you expect them to submit, what you expect them to do throughout the school year. And then that can be given through the learning plan. And then you have to be concise with your instructions. Simple but clear. No, you have to give them simple but clear instructions. And then you have to make sure that even if they're using modules and there may be less interaction or there may be no interactions, you have to make sure that they are engaged in the content, still engaged in the content. Like they should be given activities such as scenario analysis, for example, or case analysis, and where students are still engaged, no, are actively engaged in the content. You have to do that. And you have to provide adequate guidance and support to your students. Remember that the support is not limited to just the academic support, but you have to provide them with logistic support if feasible, and also psychosocial or emotional support. And you have to provide quality feedback. Providing quality and immediate feedback is important in distance learning, because that's when your students feel that they're not alone, no? And that will help your students progress in the course or in the subject, no, that they take. And of course, the main component are you teachers, you as experts in your field. You have to remember that even if there are readily available modules, the additional learning activities that you provide your students as experts of that content, no, will help your students. And the way you give the kind of assessment that you also provide to them, the kind of learning resources that you provide to them will be very beneficial and will help you deliver an effective instruction in distance learning. Remember, continue to learn from others on how they do it. For as teachers, we're always students. Thank you po.
Ayan, thank you very much, Dr. Mona, for your very informative and insightful session. Pasensya na po sa mga viewers natin at nagka-technical problem tayo. Malamang ganito rin yung mga challenges na ma-encounter ng mga teachers natin come opening of school year. Pero kaya naman nating i-hurdle ang mga challenges na ito. Thank you so much, Dr. Mona. Okay, so dumako na po tayo sa ating Q&A. Okay, so let me read here some questions. Ito po, Dr. Mona, what do you recommend as a good class size for effective module-based remote instruction? How do we handle a class of 45 learners?
Well, even in face-to-face, class size is really a problem. A big class size is really a problem here in the Philippines. In UPOU, we have this 30 limit for a class. So 30 is okay, but in that case, we have a tutor that helps us. So the tutor that, or an assistant that we can tap, to help us in, for example, in assessing or in rating the outputs of the students.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. Here's another question from Gina Nambli Sakilan. Okay, humihingi pala siya ng soft copy of the learning and monitoring plan. Okay.
Okay, sorry. There's the sample.
Ito from J. Azanya, sorry. How can we chop for the subjects per day? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Mona.
There's in that memo issued by USEC, USEC DADS, there's a sample monitoring plan and a sample weekly home learning plan, which you can adapt,
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mona. Here's a question from Jay Azania. How can we chop the subjects per day in the learning plan, considering that the modules given to pupils should be retrieved? Is this retrieved or passed to the teacher every Monday? The modules be given to pupils do not necessarily mean that they have to accomplish everything during the week, or sorry po, medyo na shortcut yung tanong, hindi ko masyado mabasa. Madami po kasing activities which I think cannot be done by the pupils with the allotted time given. Okay, so I think this has something to do with chopping the lessons or scheduling certain lessons for a given, for the whole duration of the week.
Sorry, the question is to keep track of the outputs of the students?
It's about chopping daw. How can we chop daw? Yung mga subjects per day?
The module should be that should be in the module already, so the lessons should be good for 1 day only. So module writers should be aware of that, so that it will be easy for the teacher who will use the module and the students to schedule, if the module is if the activity is too long, or if the lesson is in the module is too long, then the teacher who's guiding the student, meaning the teacher who's not the module writer, can chop it in, depende sa tingin ninyo kung alin yung doable in a particular period. I believe that DepEd is still considering, even if you're doing modular distance learning, they're still using that period for your subject. Yung if it's science, it's 60 minutes ba? So yun pa rin. So you check if that activity in the module is doable within the 60-minute period. If it's not, then you can still continue by telling your students in the learning plan that this particular activity is good for 2 sessions or for 2 periods. So this can be covered from Monday and to Tuesday, for example. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mona. Here's another question from Femi, kay Sir Femi Dura Adarayan. Doc Mona, what were the toughest challenges you encountered in MDL or ODL as a teacher or facilitator? How were you able to address these?
Well, the very biggest challenge that I have encountered was when I have students who don't submit any output at all. So it's a challenge for me because I don't know what's happening to them. So I see him or her logging into the course and nandun siya nag-check but no output at all. So it's a big challenge because if I after asking them their problem, it's not at all related to academics. So it's personal related. So factors that are, kunyari yung may problema sa bahay, namatayan sila. So that's a big challenge for me because I don't know how to help them. All I can do is give them or comfort them and assure them that I'll give them extension. So yun po ang biggest challenge sa akin. Well, the second one is probably having a big class. Like I had once a class of 80 students. So doon mahirap po yung mag-check ng outputs nila. So what I did to address the challenge is to come up with automated quizzes. This is for online, no? So in the case of modular instruction, siguro, you can, well, I believe that DepEd has stipulated in the basic learning education continuity plan that they will provide for learning facilitators. So those will be your assistants, I suppose, that you can tap, no, to help you, for example, in the checking of the outputs of the students, because that will be a very big bulk, no, of the work that you will do, especially in your case. Na I think you will have more than 30 students in your class. So malaki-laki, marami-rami yung outputs na i-check po ninyo.
Okay, more questions are coming in. Here's a question from Ma'am Jeannie Rose Hilopin. I'm a practical research teacher po, and one of the essential part po sa subject namin is the consultation period. How can we make it happen in modular learning approach?
Well, if the student does not have access to the internet, what you can really do is call. If wala siyang access to a telephone, you can set up a consultation, but probably it should be, scheduled such that hindi sila sama-sama or hindi sila marami. And then if hindi allowed ang students in your area to go out because of the level ng ECQ ninyo, then your learning facilitator can help, no, kasi that learning facilitator will be somebody near the or in the community of the learner. So pwedeng siya yung ma-assign po ninyo and doon po kayo makipag-communicate with the learning facilitator, or your students can probably write down their questions and then their parents can drop them in your Dropbox in school and you can reply to the questions of your students. Pwede pong ganon siguro. Kung talagang walang physical reporting or walang face-to-face, no? Hindi talaga allowed. So pwedeng ganon po siguro. An adult who's allowed to go out can bring the questions to you. You can drop them in the Dropbox so that you don't need to see them face to face. Then you can answer those questions and then you can tell them to get back the answers, to get the answers after a day or after a week probably.
So para sa inyo mga kasama, anong pinakamahalagang pabaon ng webinar natin on delivering instruction through modular distance learning? Comment your answers below, mga kasama. Share with us your ideas and suggestions. We will be featuring some of the best and most relevant answers on our Facebook page tomorrow. Let us continue the conversation on KaSaMaTeachers.ph. Okay, so the link is on your screen now. Thank you, Dr. Mona, for sharing with us your time and expertise. We have learned so much from your lesson. I'm sure marami ring takeaways ang ating mga kasama. Before we officially end, is there anything else that you would like to share with us, Dr. Mona?
Wala na, except that I would like to apologize for what happened this morning. I didn't anticipate that
Okay,
one.
thank you very much sa pagsama nyo sa amin sa webinar session natin ngayon. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Mona.
Okay, hindi ko alam. Wrong timing lang talaga. I hope that on September 3, the connection will be okay now. So, first time po na nag-webinar ako na nag-gano ng problema. I'm really sorry. Pero I hope you still
okay.
got the message and you still gain something from the discussion. And I will gladly share with you my presentation. You can just email me at mtsasing@up.edu.ph if you want a copy of the presentation. Thank you. And see you on September 3.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. Thank you very much sa pagsama niyo sa amin sa webinar session na ito ngayong umaga. We have 2 more sessions for this set, mga kasama. Narito ang schedule ng next 2 sessions natin. Kasama pa rin si Dr. Mona Sasing. For updates, stay tuned lang po sa ating KaSaMa Teachers Community Facebook page. We value your feedback to help us improve our webinar sessions. Kindly click on the link in the pinned comment or the link in the caption to answer a quick survey. Okay, so there you are. For helpful and relevant learning resources, join us by signing up for free at www.kasamateachers.ph. Nariyan po ang link sa inyong screen. Link po yan sa quick survey. Maraming salamat po. On behalf of UP NISMED, Gokongwei Brothers Foundation, and KaSaMa Teachers Community, thank you everyone for participating in our KaSaMa webinar session for this set. Keep safe and stay healthy. Mga kasama, see you all in our next webinar sessions. Keep safe po. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.